They forced Black Gatekeeper to fly. The truth about Ace Fighter pilot. Revealed. For 8 years, no one at Northridge Air Force Base knew who Naomi Grant really was. To them, she was just the quiet janitor, low profile, early to arrive, last to leave. Every morning she swept the same hangars she used to command. Every afternoon she scrubbed floors where her name had once echoed in flight logs. And every night she walked past the jets she used to fly. Without a single glance back. She never corrected the young officers who barked orders at her. She never flinched when they laughed about diversity hires or affirmative action pilots. She just listened and remembered. Because Naomi wasn't always invisible. Once she was Captain Naomi Skyfire Grant, the youngest black woman ever to lead an elite fighter squadron. Her skills in the sky were legendary, her precision unmatched. Until one mission changed everything. She had uncovered a military secret too dangerous to expose a general selling American weapons to foreign enemies. She reported it. Days later, she was labeled a traitor, dishonorably discharged, and quietly erased. No court, no hearing, just silence. But Naomi had survived, and she had waited. And while others rose on lies, she cleaned the very floors beneath their feet, collecting evidence, biding time. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth to fly again. And that day began like most others, with a mop in her hand. And the wrong man making the worst mistake of his life. They called it a lesson in humility. Captain Mason Reddick stood tall at the center of the Northridge Air Force Base hangar, his flight boots echoing sharply on the concrete floor. His voice rang with condescension, loud enough to turn heads and draw a small crowd of young recruits and seasoned officers alike. "Bring our beloved janitor forward," he barked, pointing with mock ceremony. "Let's see if she knows which end of the plane is up." The laughter was instant, cruel, and familiar. Naomi Grant, 40, dark-skinned, lean, her hair tied into a tight bun, kept her eyes down and her hands firm on the mop. 8 years she had cleaned this base. 8 years of being invisible, of swallowing every insult. Today wasn't different until Reddick decided it was. He strolled over with his usual smirk. "Tell me Ms. Grant ever sat in a cockpit?" "No, well, that's about to change. Lieutenant Sloan, get her the suit." The officers around him chuckled. Lieutenant Harper Sloan hesitated just for a second, but followed the order, retrieving a faded flight suit and helmet from the equipment locker. Naomi didn't speak. She didn't refuse. She simply accepted the gear with the kind of quiet grace that didn't belong in a hangar full of arrogance. Reddick leaned in close enough for only her to hear. "You're going to look ridiculous. This is for morale, you understand. A bit of fun. Be a good sport." Naomi nodded, never meeting his eyes. As she stepped into the flight suit, her hands moved too precisely for someone unfamiliar. The fingers found the straps instinctively. She tightened the buckles without thought. Harper noticed, but said nothing, chalking it up to luck. The crowd grew. "Today," Reddick announced with theatrical flair, "we let the cleaning lady experience greatness. She'll sit in a fully functional F-16, and for a brief moment pretend she belongs in the sky." The officers laughed again. Naomi didn't. Her face was unreadable. She approached the aircraft with measured steps, the flight helmet dangling at her side. The jet had been prepped for a systems check that morning, nothing more than routine maintenance. But now it had become a stage. "Climb in," Reddick ordered. Naomi placed the helmet on her head and ascended the ladder. Her motions were fluid, unhurried, and familiar. She slid into the seat like it had never stopped being hers. Somewhere in the crowd, a young mechanic whispered, "She looks like she's done this before." Up in the control tower, Colonel Elijah Turner glanced through his binoculars, frowning. He'd been watching from the beginning, not because of Reddick, but because something about Naomi had always struck him as off. Not in a bad way, in a way that felt out of place for someone supposedly without credentials. Now he couldn't look away. Inside the cockpit, Naomi adjusted her mirrors, flipped switches, and checked the control panel. Her breathing was calm. Her fingers moved like a pianist over familiar keys. Reddick, growing uneasy, called out, "Don't touch anything. Just sit and smile for the camera." But Naomi had already begun the startup sequence. Down below, Harper raised his phone to film. His amusement slowly turned into confusion. He leaned toward Reddick. "Sir." "She's not hesitating." "Beginner's luck," Reddick muttered, but his voice betrayed the first trace of doubt. Naomi's hand hovered over the throttle. For 8 years, she had been silent, sweeping around engines she once commanded, folding into the background of the institution that exiled her. Now, in one sharp breath, the past surged forward. The engines ignited. The roar filled the hangar like thunder. A few officers stumbled back. Mechanics stopped mid-task, heads snapping toward the sound. "What the hell?" Reddick turned toward Harper. "Is that thing live?" Harper nodded slowly. "She started it. Like she's done it before." Naomi didn't speak. Her eyes scanned the instrument panel with the rhythm of muscle memory. Her back straightened. Her face hardened not with fear, but with resolve. For 8 years, she had prepared for this. She wasn't just reclaiming a machine. She was reclaiming a part of herself they had buried. Control tower systems lit up. "This is Griffin 27 requesting taxi clearance," came Naomi's voice over comms. Clear, calm, utterly professional. The tower fell silent. Turner leaned in. "What did she just say?" The operator hesitated. "She used correct designation and code." "Sir, that's military-grade fluency." Reddick's face turned pale. "That's not possible." But it was. And deep down, even he knew something was very, very wrong with this joke. Naomi didn't flinch. Her voice repeated across the base frequencies, Griffin 27 requesting clearance for movement. Turner finally stood. "Patch me into a private channel with that pilot." And across the base, as dozens watched a janitor become something else entirely, the cracks in Reddick's confidence began to show. The game had started. But Naomi Grant wasn't playing. Colonel Elijah Turner stood motionless in the control tower headset, pressed tight to his ear, as Naomi's calm voice repeated, "Griffin 27, requesting clearance for movement." Every syllable sliced through the air like a coded message only the experienced could decipher. This wasn't mimicry. This wasn't guesswork. This was fluency, built on repetition, soaked in protocol, sharpened by years of real-world command. He turned to the air traffic officer beside him. "Run a scan on that voice. I want confirmation. Cross-check the logs from the last 10 years of decommissioned call signs. Now." "Sir," the operator stammered. "It's Griffin 27 was deactivated 8 years ago." Turner exhaled slowly. His gut was already ahead of the evidence. On the ground, Reddick was unraveling. "Kill the power," he barked at the technicians. "That plane doesn't move another inch." The techs hesitated. "Captain, the ignition sequence is locked in." "She knows what she's doing. She's a janitor. She just ran the warm-up cycle with textbook precision." Reddick grabbed the radio. "Griffin 27. This is Captain Reddick. Shut down the engine, now." Naomi's voice returned even and precise. "Negative, Captain. Tower clearance pending. Holding position for taxi." Harper stopped filming and slowly lowered his phone. "Sir." She used procedural language. "That's not something you learn on YouTube." Reddick shot him a glare, but said nothing. Naomi sat in the cockpit, like a woman home at last. Her movements no longer cautious. Her posture erect, centered, focused, radiated authority. She wasn't improvising. She was remembering. 8 years of silence had only refined her muscle memory. Turner finally stepped to the primary comms channel. "Unidentified pilot, this is Colonel Elijah Turner. State your full name and rank." A pause. Then the reply came quiet, but strong. "Colonel, is that really you?" He froze. The voice, it hadn't aged. Just cooled, hardened. "Naomi," he whispered, leaning toward the mic. "Naomi Grant." The answer carried the weight of a decade buried alive. Level 2, Janitor Naomi Grant, formerly Captain Naomi Skyfire. Grant designation, Griffin 27. "I was declared dead, sir, but I was only erased." Silence fell in the control tower. Turner stepped back from the mic, heart racing. He remembered her now. The star pilot. The first black woman to lead an elite fighter squadron. The one who vanished after a classified mission went wrong, and whose case had been buried under suspicious bureaucracy. "You're alive." Turner muttered more to himself than anyone. "Yes, sir." "But not by their design," she answered. Down on the runway, the F-16 inched forward, beginning its slow taxi toward the head of the airstrip. With every meter, officers from across the base gathered, confusion and awe flickering in their eyes. Harper had resumed filming, but now he wasn't narrating. He was documenting history. Reddick chased alongside the jet, shouting into his headset, his voice shrill. "She's stealing military property. That's aircraft theft. Lock her out of the systems." But no one listened. Every command he barked felt hollower than the last. Naomi's voice cut through again. "Tower Griffin. 27 is lined up for runway clearance. Requesting full demonstration window per Regulation 14.9. Regulation 14.9. Turner murmured. "That's for elite-level solo training exercises. You only use that for—" His voice trailed off. It was a code only high-ranking pilots used, reserved for legacy call signs. And Naomi had just invoked it with confidence. "Sir," the air traffic controller whispered, "she knows regulations better than half our senior staff." The camera feeds streamed the hangar's internal network. Officers and recruits watched wide-eyed as Naomi completed her final system checks. Her fingers danced over the control's eyes, scanning every movement executed with uncanny precision. "Who the hell is she?" one young airman asked. Colonel Turner responded without turning his head. "She's the best damn pilot we ever buried." Meanwhile, Harper scrolled through Naomi's archived military record, what was left of it. Most of it had been redacted, but there were still fragments, commendations, flight hours in 5 aircraft types, operation names, mission honors, and then discharge, dishonorable, national security breach. He looked up at Naomi through the cockpit glass, now clear as day. She didn't just belong in the plane, she embodied it. Suddenly Harper realized this wasn't a stunt gone wrong. This was history correcting itself. And Reddick. He was on the wrong side of it. Back in the tower, Turner made a decision. "Clear her for takeoff," he said. The control room went still. "Sir," asked the junior operator. "You heard me. Full clearance. I want the sky open and every sensor tracking." "But she's not. I mean, she doesn't have—" "She has everything she needs." He flipped the main frequency open. "Griffin 27. This is Colonel Turner. You are cleared for unrestricted airspace. Demonstrate at will." Down on the runway, Naomi smiled faintly. Then she pushed the throttle. The roar of the jet swallowed the field. In seconds, the F-16 tore down the runway and lifted into the sky with a grace no one had expected and a fire no one could deny. She didn't just take off. She rose. Reddick stood frozen as the jet vanished into the clouds, a single line of vapor trailing behind. He had wanted a spectacle. He got a reckoning. Reddick stood rooted to the tarmac, the heat from the F-16's afterburner still radiating against his face as the jet soared skyward faster, smoother, and more deliberately than any rookie or fraud could ever manage. The vapor trail cut the sky like a signature, bold and unapologetic. He looked around, desperate to find someone, anyone still under his command. But all eyes were fixed on the sky. Naomi Grant was no longer a janitor. And now he knew, so did everyone else. Up in the control tower, Colonel Turner lowered his binoculars slowly, his voice calm but edged with something deeper. "You're watching a ghost, gentlemen, and she flies better than any of us ever did." Naomi's voice crackled again over the open frequency, clear and composed. "Tower Griffin 27. Commencing maneuver sequence, Alpha 1. Turner raised his eyebrows. Alpha 1 was no beginner's set. It was part of the legacy demonstration used during international air shows and elite graduation displays. Few pilots attempted it. Even fewer succeeded. Did she just say Alpha One? Whispered a stunned flight instructor, watching from the tarmac. Naomi didn't wait for awe to settle. She dipped the nose of the F-16 into a controlled dive, leveled out with pinpoint precision, then pulled into a steep climb that seemed to defy gravity. At the peak, she twisted the jet into an inverted roll, descending backwards before leveling again. Perfect timing, perfect balance. Cheers broke out from a group of veteran mechanics, watching from the hangar doors. "That's not just flying," one said. "That's poetry." Harper Sloan kept filming his phone's camera, still locked on the sky. His hand trembled, not from fear, but adrenaline. His live stream, once meant to mock a janitor, was now peaking at over 80,000 viewers. Comments flooded the screen. "Who is she? That's not a simulation, that's real. Phoenix reborn. She's better than any demo team I've ever seen." Turner glanced at one of his aides. "Broadcast her call sign to the national net. Let them hear it. Let them remember." The aide hesitated. "Sir, that'll go wide. Press civilians even command?" "Exactly." Meanwhile, Reddick stormed back into the operations center, fists clenched. "This is a security breach. She's flying unauthorized." Turner didn't even look at him. "She's flying better than anyone authorized. That's what matters. She's a criminal." "She was framed," Turner said flatly, "by your grandfather, and others like him." Reddick's expression faltered. "You don't know that." Naomi's voice came through again, calm, exact. "Colonel Turner, transmitting secure packet now. Coordinates confirm encrypted cloud upload of all related evidence to Base Command, the DOJ, and select press outlets." Reddick's face drained of color. Turner's eyes narrowed. "What evidence?" Naomi continued, her voice steady, but fierce. 8 years of recordings, bank logs, flight manifests, and deathbed confessions, including General Grayson's full admission, recorded without his knowledge in a private hospital chapel. He thought the priest couldn't talk. He was wrong. Gasps erupted around the control room. Reddick staggered backward. That's impossible." Turner's stare hardened. "It's not. It never was. Your family legacy's coming down, son." Back in the air, Naomi shifted into her final pattern, a high-speed vertical climb, followed by a split S, rolling into a tight arc that brought her low enough to skim the runway, her contrail casting a long shadow over Reddick's frozen figure. Tower Griffin. 2-7 initiating final sequence. Permission for signature loop. Turner smiled despite himself. "Granted, Captain." She pulled into a sweeping upward spiral, trailing vapor trails behind her in a wide, graceful arc. As she crested the top and dove down again, the jet left behind a clear sky-etched word, Phoenix. The base erupted in murmurs, gasps, applause. Reddick collapsed onto a bench, staring up as if he could erase what he saw. Harper turned the camera back to him now, shaking not from excitement, but from something heavier. "Sir, you should know this video is at 200,000 live viewers, trending globally." Reddick didn't answer. He just stared up, jaw slack. Naomi's voice returned once more, this time, across all base speakers, calm, proud, resolute. "For 8 years, I scrubbed floors while men like Mason Reddick laughed about the diversity hire who vanished in disgrace. I heard every joke. I felt every dismissal. But I never forgot who I was." The crowd outside listened in stunned silence. I was not erased. I was waiting. Up in the tower, Turner gave a quiet nod to the comms officer. "Bring her in." "Griffin 2-7, came the tower's reply. "You are cleared for landing." Naomi brought the jet around smoothly. Her approach was textbook flawless descent, immaculate angle, her wheels kissing the tarmac so gently it seemed unreal. As she taxied toward the hangar, hundreds of personnel had gathered silent, watching, many with tears in their eyes. The moment the cockpit opened, cameras snapped, phones raised, and Mason Reddick knew he hadn't just lost control of a situation. He'd awakened a legend. The crowd stood frozen as the canopy lifted. Naomi Grant rose from the cockpit, the late afternoon sun catching the edge of her visor, before she removed the helmet with calm precision. Her braided hair was damp with sweat, but her eyes steady, unshaken, met hundreds of others below. She climbed down the ladder one slow step at a time, her boots landing softly on the concrete that had known only silence from her for nearly a decade. And now that silence was shattered. Every officer, cadet, technician, and general lining the runway watched as she stepped forward, not as a janitor returning from a prank, but as a pilot reclaiming her legacy. Colonel Turner walked out from the control tower, holding a sealed black folder marked Classified, Command Authority Only. He handed it to her without a word. Cameras clicked, phones flashed. Harper Sloan, still live-streaming to over 500,000 viewers, now whispered into his mic. "She just landed like a damn general. I don't even know what to say anymore." Reddick, standing a few paces back, tried to make himself small in the crowd. He couldn't. The same people who once laughed at his jokes were now avoiding his eyes. Naomi opened the folder. Inside was her full reinstatement rank clearance command eligibility. A decade late, but official. She held it for a moment, then looked up at Turner. "Colonel," she said clearly, so that the entire base could hear. "I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not here for reinstatement." Turner blinked. You're refusing it." "I've already done what I came to do," she replied. "This wasn't about getting my wings back. It was about removing theirs." She turned her gaze to Reddick, who visibly flinched. "For 8 years," she continued, "I cleaned the corridors where men like him strutted and bragged. I listened to every slur, every doubt, every lie." Her voice never rose, but it struck like thunder. "I wasn't silent because I was weak. I was watching, waiting, and now every second of their corruption is recorded, archived, and sent to every outlet that still believes in truth." Turner's voice was quiet, full of awe. "The files?" Naomi nodded. "Grayson's confession, wire transfers, communications between procurement officers and foreign clients. Even Reddick's own threats to junior pilots who questioned authority. It's all there." A heavy silence fell on the group. Then someone spoke. "Ma'am, what will you do now?" It was one of the new recruits, maybe 19 eyes wide with admiration. Naomi turned to her. "I'm going to build something they can't tear down," she said. "I'm going to create a place where merit matters more than legacy, where no one has to hide their brilliance behind a broom." The girl nodded slowly, eyes misting. In the back of the crowd, a military SUV skidded to a stop. 4 MPs jumped out flanking a federal marshal. They walked straight toward Reddick. "Captain Mason Reddick," the marshal called. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, tampering with government property, and participating in the concealment of a military conspiracy." Reddick stumbled backward. Wait, I didn't know who she was." Naomi didn't look at him. "That's not the problem," she said, her voice sharp. "The problem is how you treat people when you think they're beneath you." Turner gave the marshal a nod. "Take him." As Reddick was handcuffed and led away, Harper turned the camera back to Naomi, who hadn't moved an inch. "Miss Grant," he asked, "why now? Why reveal yourself today?" Naomi paused for the first time. Then she spoke quietly, almost reflectively. "Because people like Reddick think they can bury truth under arrogance. But truth doesn't rot. It waits. It prepares. And one day, it takes flight." The quote spread across the live stream within seconds. In Washington, alerts rang across military networks. News outlets began requesting interviews. The hashtag #JoshSkyfire returns hit global trending within 20 minutes. And Naomi Shee walked past the crowd, folder in hand, toward a small, unmarked hangar at the far edge of the base, her old training bay long abandoned. Inside sat a dismantled simulator covered in dust. She placed the reinstatement folder on the console, then turned to Harper, who had followed at a respectful distance. "Do you really want the next generation to fly?" she asked. "Yes," he said instantly. "Then don't just film the sky. Build it." She gave him a small nod and walked away toward the command center, where she would deliver the final encryption key to a secured network holding years of evidence. Back on the tarmac, the base was still buzzing. Officers exchanged whispers. Cadets looked at one another with new eyes. And somewhere deep in the Pentagon, a committee had already been called. Naomi didn't wait for permission anymore. She had already taken off, and now she wasn't coming back down. The room was silent as Naomi Grant entered the command center. She carried nothing but a flash drive and a calmness that unsettled even the highest-ranking officers present. The room normally filled with the mechanical hum of servers, and the clipped voices of encrypted comms felt frozen in place. It wasn't fear that gripped them, it was reverence. The kind that only comes when someone walks in, not with rank, but with purpose. She approached the main terminal. Colonel Turner stood nearby, watching her with a quiet mix of pride and disbelief. "You really have it all?" he asked softly. Naomi nodded. 8 years of evidence. I didn't hide in the shadows because I had no power. I hid so I could collect every piece of the system that tried to bury me. She inserted the flash drive into the encrypted military port. Instantly, the screen came alive. File names, dates, voice recordings, account numbers, and visual confirmation of high-level transactions. The interface displayed a file index categorized under Operation Erasure. Turner leaned in, reading aloud. Voice confession, General Malcolm Grayson. Location Hospice Confessional, Northridge Medical. Naomi opened the file. On screen, a grainy video showed the late General Grayson in his final days. He spoke slowly, weakly unaware a hidden device was recording every word. "I thought burying her would protect my legacy. We had no choice." She knew about the shipment's arms for money funneled through proxies. Her squadron intercepted too much. Her silence meant survival. The confession went on. Naomi didn't flinch. She had listened to it 100 times. Turner looked at her. Why now? Naomi's answer was simple. Because the people who tried to destroy me finally laughed too loud. And now, the whole world is listening. As Turner began uploading the files to military intelligence, Naomi turned and walked out back into the sunlight. Outside, Harper Sloan was waiting beside the base gates. His live stream had surpassed 1 million viewers. A satellite truck from a major news outlet was already parked nearby, reporters scrambling to catch up with the unfolding chaos. Harper looked at Naomi, speechless. "Still rolling?" she asked. He nodded. Naomi stepped in front of the camera. Her voice was clear, controlled. "For those just joining," she said, "I'm not here to reclaim a uniform. I'm here to destroy a system of arrogant silence and manufactured superiority, one that forgets that skill has no color and dignity has no rank." She looked directly into the lens. "They called me a janitor, but I was never cleaning floors. I was sweeping away the rot." The comment section exploded. Naomi stepped away and joined Turner on the tarmac, where a military transport was waiting. Not for her, but for the documents. High Command had called for a full tribunal. What began as a prank had become a full-scale purge. "Where are you going next?" Turner asked. She smiled faintly. "To build something they can't infiltrate." He tilted his head. "You mean the Flight Academy?" Naomi nodded. "Grant Flight Academy. Applications already open. I have 30 former pilots who were pushed out for being unfit, wrong gender, wrong race, wrong background. They're ready to teach what the sky never forgot." Turner extended his hand. "I meant what I said. You could command any squadron in the world right now." She shook it. "Then let me command the next generation. Not with fear, but with faith." Across the base, junior officers and staff began re-watching her flight footage on loop. The maneuvers, the control, the symbol etched into the sky. One even printed a still image of the word Phoenix in vapor trails and pinned it to the wall outside the barracks. Meanwhile, Mason Reddick sat in a military holding cell head, in hands the echo of the flight still replaying in his mind. He didn't understand how it had fallen apart so fast. One moment, he had control. The next, his family's decades-long grip on military supply chains, promotions, and appointments was crumbling like wet paper. The DOJ had already subpoenaed 5 family foundations and frozen their accounts. His name was plastered across every major outlet next to the word disgraced. And the worst part, he wasn't even the main story. Back in Washington, high-ranking defense officials reviewed Naomi's files. Her records were restored, her medals reinstated. Her name, once deleted from digital archives, was returned in full, Captain Naomi Skyfire Grant. But Naomi wasn't in Washington. She was already walking through the doors of a warehouse in the outskirts of Atlanta, once abandoned, now echoing with the sound of drills and the clatter of tools. Volunteers were setting up simulator pods, arranging blueprints, installing tracking screens. Harper followed close behind, now more documentarian than bystander. "You think this will work?" he asked. Naomi turned, surveying the place. "It already has. The moment I stopped waiting for permission." On the wall behind her, a large banner hung from ceiling to floor. It read, "Lift others higher, because we all rise together." She didn't say it out loud. She didn't have to. The flight wasn't over. It had just begun. The hum of construction filled the space, a rhythmic chorus of drills, forklifts, and shouted instructions echoing through the vast hangar that would soon become Grant Flight Academy's first official training bay. Naomi stood in the middle of it all, watching, as the team she'd quietly assembled, disenfranchised veterans, grounded pilots, overlooked engineers, brought her vision to life. Only days earlier, she'd been cleaning the halls of a military base that had tried to forget her. Now, she was directing the future from the ground up. "You know this isn't just a school anymore," Harper Sloan said, adjusting the focus on his shoulder-mounted camera. "It's a movement." Naomi didn't look away from the workers installing the flight simulators. "Then, it better fly like one." Harper chuckled under his breath, but his voice carried admiration more than humor. Outside, a line had already formed. Dozens of young men and women, some in well-worn boots, some barefoot, waited with application folders in hand. Their faces held a strange blend of awe and hunger. They weren't just here to fly. They were here because they had been told their entire lives that they couldn't. And Naomi had proved that the sky didn't care about permission. Inside the hangar, a call came through on Naomi's secured line. She stepped aside and answered. "Grant," she said. Naomi, Colonel Turner's voice came through. "Thought you should know, official word just dropped. Mason Reddick has been dishonorably discharged. He's being held for trial. 37 other officers implicated in the evidence you submitted have been suspended or are under review. It's moving fast." Naomi closed her eyes briefly, not in satisfaction, but in release. "About time," she said quietly. Turner paused. "They offered you command again. A full air group. Global mobility." "I said no, Elijah," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "You already know why." Turner sighed. "I do. But still, they could use someone like you back in uniform." "I am in uniform," Naomi said, turning toward the first flight simulator where two girls were buckling in. "Just not the one they issue." Across the room, a young student struggled with the seat harness. Naomi walked over without a word and knelt beside her. "Try loosening the chest strap first," she said. The girl, barely 17, looked startled, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am," Naomi smiled. "You don't have to call me ma'am here. Just Director Grant." "You really flew one of those jets?" the girl asked, pointing to a poster of Naomi's F-16, emblazoned with the now iconic contrail spelling, Phoenix. Naomi's eyes softened. "I did." What did it feel like? Naomi thought for a long moment. Like remembering who you are, after they spent years trying to make you forget. The girl nodded slowly, strapping in tighter this time. Back in the media world, Harper's footage had been picked up by global networks. His full documentary, Skyfire: The Woman They Tried to Erase, was scheduled to release within the month. Major newspapers hailed Naomi's exposure of the conspiracy as the most significant act of military whistleblowing since the Cold War. Political careers were crumbling in real time, and Naomi's school applications came from all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and even military dependents stationed overseas. General Mitchell, the newly promoted head of Air Force operations, visited unannounced a week later. Naomi greeted him in a simple navy shirt, with the Academy's insignia stitched into the collar. "You turned down a command to build a warehouse," he said, gesturing to the rough walls still being finished. Naomi corrected him. "I turned down a command to build a launch pad." Mitchell nodded. "The Pentagon wants to fund your program." Naomi shook her head. "No. We fund ourselves. Donations from the people who believe in what we're doing are enough. If they back us, they'll try to own us. And we've already seen how that ends." "You've changed a lot," Phoenix Mitchell said softly, using her old call sign for the first time in public. Naomi smiled, not proudly, but peacefully. "No. I just stopped hiding it." That afternoon, the first class of 20 cadets stood in front of Naomi as she delivered her inaugural address. "I won't promise that everyone here will become a pilot," she began. "But I do promise you this. No one will be underestimated. No one will be silenced. And no one will ever be alone in the air again." Applause broke out raw and real. As the cadets filed into the simulators, Harper turned his camera toward Naomi. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you never got in that cockpit that day?" Naomi didn't hesitate. "They would have kept laughing, and I would have kept sweeping. But then again, stories like mine always find a way to fly." Outside, painted on the wall above the Academy doors, were the words Harper had caught during her last landing. "They thought I was gone. But I was just circling back." It was more than a quote. It was prophecy. The words painted above the doors, "They thought I was gone. But I was just circling back," glowed under the late afternoon sun. Naomi stood beneath them, arms crossed, watching her cadets practice on the simulators. It had been only a few weeks since Grant Flight Academy officially opened, and yet the space already pulsed with motion, determination, and something rarer than either belief. Inside, rows of trainees were immersed in their digital cockpits, faces lit by blue screens, their focus razor-sharp. Every time Naomi walked the rows, she saw younger versions of herself, hopeful, underestimated, burning with quiet ambition. She didn't need a uniform or a title to command their respect. They gave it freely, not because of who she had once been, but because of what she had chosen to become. Director Grant Amanda, her assistant, called from the admin room. "We just received 30 more applications. That's 70 today." Naomi smiled faintly. "Tell them all we'll make room." Amanda hesitated. "Even the ones with no flying experience." "Especially them," Naomi replied. "We're not looking for polish. We're looking for grit." At that moment, a notification buzzed across Amanda's screen. She turned the monitor and gestured for Naomi to come closer. "You might want to see this." The headline read, "Military Whistleblower Naomi Grant, awarded Congressional Medal of Honor for service and reform impact." Naomi blinked at the words, her expression unreadable. The article went on to detail not only her career as a pilot, but also the systemic changes her exposure of the corruption network had sparked: ethics reviews, promotions reassessed, whistleblower protections reinforced, and dozens of appointments frozen pending investigation. She looked away from the screen. "I didn't do any of it for medals." Amanda nodded. "I know. But they're still giving you one." The ceremony was scheduled for the following week in D.C. But Naomi hadn't decided if she would go. It felt strange being asked to wear the very regalia that once marked her erasure. Still, part of her understood that sometimes symbols weren't for the one receiving them, but for everyone watching. Later that evening, she sat alone in her office, the room quiet, except for the hum of cooling fans and distant laughter from the simulator bay. On the wall behind her desk hung a photo the moment she removed her helmet after landing the F-16 weeks earlier. Sunlight catching the edge of her face, jaw set, eyes clear. The image had become iconic, reposted across news platforms, turned into murals printed on classroom walls. She hadn't posed for it. She had simply landed. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Harper stepped in, camera slung low, no longer filming, just visiting. "I heard they're planning a movie," he said. "Let them," Naomi replied. So long as they get the part right where I clean toilets better than anyone else on base. Harper laughed, but it faded into a moment of quiet between them. Then he asked, "Do you regret staying silent all those years?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was low and steady. "I don't regret surviving. And I don't regret watching. I learned more in silence than I ever did in uniform." He nodded slowly. "And now I speak," she said. "And I teach others how to fly loud." The next morning, as the academy opened its gates to the largest group of applicants yet, news broke that Mason Reddick had been formally convicted of obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. His family's holdings had been liquidated, his reputation erased from the military's proudest registers. His name, once feared, was now synonymous with downfall. Meanwhile, Naomi's story had replaced it in military textbooks, under the chapter titled Honor Restored. Inside the academy, a new banner was raised, white against blue, with 3 words stenciled in bold black letters: competence over privilege. That afternoon, General Mitchell arrived unannounced. Naomi greeted him out front, wiping grease from her hands, after helping repair a throttle issue on one of the simulator pods. He handed her a simple envelope. "What's this, an invitation?" Mitchell said. "They're forming a new Joint Command Council to oversee reform implementation. The Pentagon wants you on it." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, to lend credibility." Maybe, Mitchell admitted, but mostly because they're finally scared of what happens when the right person gets the wrong job title. Naomi considered it. "Tell them I'll attend the meeting, but only after my cadets finish their first solo sim runs." Mitchell smiled. "I expected no less." Later that evening, Naomi stood outside watching her students emerge from the simulator rooms, laughing, clapping each other on the back, replaying errors and moments of near perfection. Every face glowed with possibility. Harper stepped beside her. "You know when this started." "I thought I was filming a joke." Naomi didn't flinch. "You were. Their joke." He nodded. "Now it's a legacy." She looked up at the horizon, now streaked with the pinks and oranges of dusk. "Not a legacy," she said. "A takeoff." And as the sun set over Grant Flight Academy, its hangar doors still open, its skyward dreams just beginning, Naomi Grant, once erased, once mocked, became something more than a survivor or a hero. She became a launchpad for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And from that day forward, no one dared call her a janitor again. They called her the woman who flew louder than silence.